appreciate that. We were back at the sound table kind of reminiscing about the old days. That's what old guys do, by the way. And it's interesting because Harvey Cedars for me is one of those places that has a very fond memory. And you look back over your journey, when you get to be this age, you kind of do a lot of reflecting on where you came from. And I came to know Jesus through the ministry of Young Life in Chester County, Pennsylvania. I was your absolute classic, right down the middle Young Life kid. It was a suburban ministry for the most part back in those days. It's not anymore, but where their origins were suburban kids and unchurched. And I had been to church maybe twice in my entire life at the age of 17. It just wasn't something we did, and I didn't even think about it. And I had heard about Jesus, but I didn't really know much about him other than he died for my sins, and that was about it. So I figured he was like an insurance policy, like Prudential. I didn't realize you had to have a policy at Prudential to be covered by Prudential, but that's a different story. I kind of thought, well, since Prudential's out there, and if I ever get into trouble, they'll cover me. That's how a kid thinks. I used to think to my dad, he would say, well, we don't have any money. And I'd say, well, let's just go to the bank, because that's where you go get the money. And it's so simple when you're a kid. You just go pull it off the money tree, and that's the way it works. It doesn't work that way. And so I was 17 years old. I was entering into my senior year of high school. And came the first day of school. Everybody's seeing each other for the first time after summer. And where you been? What have you been doing? And there's this guy standing in the hallway, and I thought it's a new teacher. It must be. He wasn't that much older than me, but he had this great big 70s power mustache. Remember that? Remember the Tom Selleck days, right? He had one of those, a great big Tom Selleck mustache. And so he wasn't a kid, but he wasn't a new teacher either. And so I couldn't put it together. And day after day, he'd be in the lobby just kind of talking to kids, friends of mine. So finally, I went over and kind of met him, and he was with a thing called Young Life. I'm like, what in the world is that? And they were going to put together a Young Life club, and they were going to have meetings. And I'm like, I'm not interested. And but he and I got to be pretty good friends, right? We'd meet each other every day, and we'd go do some stuff on the side, and we got to be pretty fast friends. And sure enough, when they started up Young Life Club, I thought, well, I'll go check it out. And I did. I was one of the first kids to go. And then that summer, the next summer, fast forward to the next summer when I graduated, he had convinced me to go to this camp up in New York called Saranac. It's up in the Adirondacks, New York, and Scott and I were pretty good friends at that point, so I said, yeah, sure, I'll go. I even got a couple other of my friends to come with us. And so we went up to Saranac, and I heard the gospel for the first time. Now, I had heard little bits of it at Young Life Club talks leading up to that point, so I was kind of a little familiar with what they were going to talk about. But the neat thing about the whole week-long experience, and you do that a lot here at Harvey Cedars as well, is you've got people for a captive audience for 6 or 7 days. So you don't have to get it all out in one talk, right? You can talk about who God is. You can talk about who Jesus is and his role with God the Father. And then you can talk about sin, which is hugely important because we don't want to talk about that anymore. There's whole churches and denominations that don't even want to deal with sin. They don't want to talk about it because it's an uncomfortable topic and it makes people feel bad about themselves in this feelings-driven world. And if you don't deal with sin, you'll never have a right relationship with God because Jesus died on the cross to forgive you of your sins. You've got to realize that you're separated from God for an eternity because of your sin. God is God and can't have anything to do with sin. Remember I said it turns his stomach? Did I talk about that? Did I talk about how sin turns God's stomach? Okay, yeah, this is good, all right? Because I do a lot. I was just talking last week, and I can't remember what I told my stories and my illustrations. I hate liver. I really do. I can't stand it. You think, boy, this guy really does have ADD. I do. I hate liver. I can't stand the smell of it, the taste of it, the texture of it. Why would you ever eat liver? Why would you ever serve liver to somebody, even somebody you didn't like? Why would you do that to them? I mean, that's just cruel and unusual. And I hate liver so much that it was a hill to die on for a 7-year-old boy. I was 7, and my mom prepared liver once, and you could smell it in the house. It was awful. She put it on the plate in front of me, and I took an obligatory little bite off of it and stuck it in my mouth, and it came right back out, and that was it. 7 years old, now I'm now 60, so that's been, 53 years. 7-year-old, I said, that will never happen again. right? So my mom's a good mom. So for 3 nights in a row, I saw that same piece of liver. And I didn't eat anything in between. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, liver, 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 liver. And nope, I'm not eating that liver. Finally, by the 3rd night, I was starving to death, So she got up and she left the room. And I took the piece of liver and I stuck it under my seat like that, right? And it stuck to the bottom of the seat. That's how nasty that liver is. Ugh. So she comes back in and she says, well, I'm glad you finally decided to eat that liver. And about that time, it hits the floor, right? And she picks it up and puts it right back on my plate. Now, I did win the battle. And I never saw that piece of liver again. And I did eat again, as you can tell. But here's the point about my illustration. I know God hates sin at least as much as I hate liver. He will never let it pass his lips. It turns his stomach. And if there's something that turns your stomach, maybe it's not liver, just insert your own disgusting thing you'll never eat in my illustration. Whatever that is, you'll never let it pass your lips because it turns your stomach. And you know what? God feels that way about my sin and your sin. And so he will never let it pass his lips. And so we've got a problem, right? We're separated from God because of our sin. And what do we do about that? And the neat thing about Saranac is they let you kind of stew on that for about 24 hours. And I thought, I've got a real problem here. And I did. And I still, back then I did. And so after 24 hours, then they tell you that Jesus Christ died on the cross to pay the price for your sin. And you can have a relationship with Jesus. And so a lot of kids went up that week and they gave their hearts to the Lord. I was too cynical to do that. And so I think I told you about coming home and challenging God and so forth. And God took the most important things in my life away from me right away. And about 3 weeks after I came back from the camp, I finally surrendered to the Lord at 6:50 p.m. in Wendy Frank's driveway. Okay, I can tell you exactly where I was. And so with all that coming together, the wonderful thing about the camping ministry was they didn't have to do it all at once, right? I had time to kind of consider it, and I think that's very respectful of the person if you can do it that way. My spiritual journey came through Harvey Cedars a couple of different times, where we were bringing kids to camp, and Young Life would rent the camp here, and we would come and share the gospel in the same way. And this place, you wonder when you look back at institutions and people, are they still walking with the Lord? Are they still doing God's work? Are they still out there, holding the banner high for Christ? And I can say yes to the guy who led me to Christ. I can say yes to Saranac, and I can say yes to Harvey Cedars. And that's a neat thing. In this day and age, my friends, that should be celebrated, right? And so I'm a little bit of a historian here. John's really the historian because he's been here a lot longer than I have. But looking back 40 years ago, you think, or when Harvey Cedars called and asked me to come and speak, I thought, I wonder what Harvey Cedars is all about these days. I was really curious, and I said yes right away. Yep, I'll absolutely come and do that, right? Because I want to check this place out again. So there are some things in the Christian community and in our lives that stay faithful to God, and that's a good thing. And those things ought to be celebrated, and they ought to be rewarded. So again, there's a little retrospective here on the camp and camping ministries and things that, this place has such a great track record that if you can, and John didn't pay me to say this, if you can financially support this place going forward, absolutely do it. I've talked to my wife several times, and I said, I'm so fond of what happened in my life at Saranac that I think maybe in our will, we're just going to put a little portion, maybe 10% or whatever of whatever we're left with. Saranac will get 10% of the debt at the end, and then they can pay it off. All right. But I think we're going to do that. All right, so we've been talking about marriage in the morning sessions. We started out a few days ago talking about the 5 benefits of marriage and how it's a relationship of unity yet diversity, and it's just so unique the way God has put it together. And it's a relationship of permanence. It's until death do us part, and we really want to keep that in the forefront. It's also a relationship that is a vertical one. It's a teaching picture that ought to lead other people to Christ by the goodness of our relationship. And then ultimately it's a relationship of administrative order, which is not all that exciting to talk about, but it's really the most important of all the 5. In that we have roles, and the man has a role and the woman has a role, and we play those different roles. And then we talked about what those different roles were. The man has 4 unique roles. He is the initiator, the protector, the provider, and the lover of the woman and the family, all at the same time. We stopped and took a little time out and talked about the 8 rules of communication for successful marriages. And in those 8 rules, and they could be successful relationships, it doesn't have to be marriage, but we talked about learning to listen and finding out the facts and letting God be your defender and dealing with anger and lifting up the spirits of other people and raising the standard. There's a whole bunch of those things that are wonderful and great for good communication and really great bonding with other people, right? When we get to be good communicators with other people, they feel rewarded for having been around us. You like people who are truly humble, and people who communicate well communicate humility to you because they respect you, they respect what you have to say, and your opinion seems important to them. And then you can return that favor to them as well. So again, good communication is really important. Then we looked at the role of the woman yesterday. More extensive than the role of the man, because women can handle more. God designed them to be multitaskers. And there was an old thing on the old Ed Sullivan show back when I was a kid, and I remember I used to love this act. He'd have this act on all the time. It was like a Chinese circus act, and they would spin the plates. Remember that? The plate spinning, all you old guys? And the guy would get out there and he'd spin one plate, and then they'd come out and they'd spin another plate, then he'd put one between his toes, he'd spin a third plate, and then pretty soon he'd put one in his mouth, he'd spin that, and then he'd put one on his forehead, he'd spin that, and pretty soon he's spinning about 12 plates all at the same time. That's a woman, all right? A woman can spin 12 plates all at the same time. Guys, you get one plate and you're going, okay, all right, hold on. That's I can't handle anything else. I got this one going on right now. I'll get to you later, right? And so we're kind of myopic and sort of one way as men, and that's okay because God wired us that way. But so ladies have a bunch of different roles. They're the suitable helper. They are chaste. They are sensible. They are respect their husbands through submission. And again, that's a difficult task because again, we're co-equals right before Christ in the same way that Jesus or God the Father is not superior to Jesus. They're co-equals, but different roles. A husband and a wife have different roles. We're equal before each other, but and it's real easy to begin to covet somebody else's role, especially in a culture that tells you that you ought to be like the opposite sex. And you ought to covet that role, or that there just simply aren't any roles. And that Bible thing, forget about that Bible thing. It's old and it's out of date and it's not sufficient for today. And that's basically the message that they're sharing with you. Now, that brings us up to where we are today. So let's talk about something fun today. I want to talk about friendship. Because friendship, to me, is absolutely key and vital to great relationships. And listen to me very carefully on this. If you go through life, your entire life, how many years it ends up being, if you go through your entire life and you have 3 really good friends, you can count yourself blessed. Now, we have a lot of acquaintances, and we call them friends. And we say, well, my friends said, or my friends were doing this, and so and I've got lots of friends, and don't think that the friends you have on this thing are actual real friends. I've got thousands of Facebook friends, and I look at the names and I go, I have no idea who that is. Who is that? It's so-and-so's birthday today. I get 10 of those a day, right? Who are these people? I don't even know. But we call them friends. They're not friends. Some of them aren't even acquaintances. So with that being said, if you have 3, now what's a friend? A friend is somebody that when your breath stinks, they'll tell you your breath stinks, and they'll hand you a breath mint. That's a friend. They stick with you through thick and thin. If there's changes in your life, if you're growing, if you're thinking, they stick with you. I've got probably, I'm really blessed. I've probably got 5 good friends in my life. But there's 2 that I went to high school with, Pete and Elaine, and neither one of them knows the Lord. And I've witnessed to both of them. And just, if you ever remember, if you're a prayer and you like to pray for people, pray for Pete and Elaine. They're brother and sister. Pete's a couple years older than me, 62 years old. Pete was going to be the best man at my wedding. But Pete and I have been fast friends for all these years. And we just recently got together. He's out in California, so we see each other every couple of years. And he was out here doing something, and I said, hey, Pete, I'm going to drive down for the day, and I'm going to see you. He was in Wilmington, North Carolina. And it was fun. We reminisced about the old days and joked about people we, have lost their hair and have gotten kind of heavy. And, we had all those kind of jokes you talk about from the old days. And then we sat down at lunch, and Pete doesn't know the Lord. Said, Steve, he said, I got to say something to you. And I said, what's that? He said, when I think of somebody who walks the walk and doesn't just talk the talk, he said, I think of you. He said, I don't completely understand your life. He said, but I look at you and I see a guy who really believes what he talks about. And he said, that is so rare, I can't tell you. And he said, I just appreciate you. Now, is the Lord working on Pete? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm still praying for Pete. I have a 10 most wanted list of people that I pray for. You should have a 10 most wanted list. If you're not deliberately praying for people, you'll never get the opportunity to share Christ with them. You might, but it'll skip your mind, and you'll think I'll see him again. And I've got this 10 most wanted list, and Pete's been on my 10 most wanted list for 40 years. Keep praying for Pete all the time, and so I got the opportunity then when Pete said that to me at our lunch. I said, Pete, well, you know what my life's all about? And I shared Christ with him again. And he said, yeah, I know. But it's a softening over the years, because years ago he would be like this about it. I don't want to talk about that. Now he wants to hear about it a little bit more. And so God's doing something. If you have 3 really good friends in your entire life, you're blessed. Most of our friends are acquaintances. So talking about friendship is critically important, especially when it comes to great relationships and that one person that you take this journey called marriage for the rest of your life. You want to be married to your best friend. Absolutely. Cultivate the friendship first. Then the romantic part should come second. So when I sit down with couples and they want to get married and I say, why do you want to get married? And they say, well, we're in love. And I go, oh, that's wonderful. We all have a big group hug. That's so nice. We're in love, right? But love is going to go away pretty soon. You don't know. But, about 6 weeks into this thing, all of a sudden you're going to be like, what did I do? Right? And I don't want to be too cynical about marriage. I still love my wife. But my word, it's gone through a lot of iterations over the years. And there's times, she would say, there's times where I don't feel like I love Steve. Yeah, but love is not a feeling. Love is an action. She loves me like crazy because she's loved me when I was unlovable, right? Scott, the guy who led me to Christ, is another one that I count among my friends. Scott loved me when I was unlovable. And I was an unlovable teenager. I was not a pleasant person. I was not nice. I would stab you in the back. I was cynical. I was negative. I was critical. And Scott loved me through all of that. He loved me not because I was lovable. He loved me because he first loved Jesus. And that's really, really hugely important. So again, you want to marry your best friend. So I'll ask couples, like I said yesterday, I'll ask couples, who's your best friend? And every once in a while, the guy doesn't get it. He goes, oh, yeah, my buddy Phil, man, he's a great guy. No. You're not going to marry Phil. You're going to marry this woman right next to you. And is she your best friend? And how do you become best friends? So I've done a little acrostic with the word friendship. And this isn't necessary. You might find some Bible verses to go with this. You're not going to find anything in the Bible that contradicts what I'm going to share with you. But this is not a verse-for-verse exegetical treatment of the Scriptures. It's just fun, and it's true, right? And it's friendship. And you ought to marry your best friend. And if you're not best friends, how do you work on that friendship? All right? How do you become genuinely affectionate towards one another, really intimate with each other? That bond of we're going through this thing together, and you know what? I chose you over all the others. And there's all the cynical jokes, of, well, nobody else would have said yes to you. Yeah, I get all that, right? But at the same time, you did. You chose each other, and you've gone on this journey, and why not have fun while you're on the journey? So number 1 on the friendship train here is find fun things to do together. Find fun things to do together. And you did when you were advertising for each other, right? In the advertising phase, you found a lot of fun things to do together. Hey, what do you want to do tonight? I don't know. Let's go to a movie. Let's go do this. Oh, I heard there's things going on over here. Let's go do that. And you scraped together every dime you had to go do those things, and you found fun things to do together. What happened to that? You got married. All right, and then the pressures of finances and paying bills, and then you start having children, and there's even more financial pressure that comes with that, and you're stressed out and tired at the end of the day, and some of you have had 2 jobs, and you put all that stuff together, and oh my word, the fun just kind of gets sucked out of the whole thing. You've got to go back and find a way to have fun, especially if you're at an age where your kids are kind of grown and maybe gone, and you've maybe just gotten out of the habit. So what do we do? And Megan and I always want to give you a suggestion on how to have fun. How do you have fun? We want you to go on a date, all right? And dating, you should never stop wooing each other. You should never get out of the dating habit. You've heard this from probably every speaker that's ever talked about marriage. You must have a date night. How often do you have that date night? I don't know. I can't tell you. Once a week sounds pretty good to me. At least twice a month, but no less than that. You ought to be regularly wooing each other as you did back in the old days when you were pursuing each other. But now that the pursuit is over, the wooing shouldn't stop. And so what does a date look like? All right, here's the Scheibner rules for a date. And Megan and I, we are on the interwebs out there, so we see all of your movements all the time. Just want to let you know that we're better than Google. And so if you don't do these three things, we will know, and we will be very disappointed in you. Okay, number one is this. No children, okay? When you go out on a date, you do not take the kids with you. You homeschoolers, you do not take the children with you. It's called a family outing when you go with the children, you homeschoolers. Now, I can say this with authority because we homeschooled for 26 years, and homeschoolers love to take their kids wherever they go, right? And I get that, and we had fun taking our kids to a lot of places, but not on date night. And so on date night, they would sit there and they'd go, Mommy, Daddy, you're leaving us and we're going to cry. And I'd be like, you know what? We love you too much to bring you along. Mommy and Daddy love you so much, we're going to leave you with this very capable babysitter, and we're going to leave. And you know how long the tears flowed after we were gone? About 20 seconds, right? Because they were trying to manipulate you through those tears. And you need to go and invest on the primary relationship, which is the husband-wife relationship. It's like the hub of the tire, or of the wheel, right? There's spokes that come out of it. Those are the kids. They're welcome members of the team, but they are not the hub. The hub is until death do us part. And if you don't pay attention to the hub and you don't secure it and make it strong, it will fall apart someday. You are not exempt from that. We do a lot of counseling, and the biggest growing group of people we're counseling are people that have been married for 40, 45, and 50 years. It's shocking to hear somebody that's been married that long that gets divorced, but it's happening more and more. Why? Because they didn't meet each other's emotional needs. They stopped being friends. They lived separate lives within the house. They tolerated one another for the sake of the children. She replaced her emotional needs that she should have been getting from him with the children. The children were loving and they met her emotional needs. But then the kids grew up and they left and they started their own family. And she turned around and she looked at him and she said, I don't know you and I don't even know if I like you anymore. They had grown apart and they allowed that to happen. They stopped taking dates. They stopped wooing each other. And you should continue to do that. So number one is no children. Number two is it needs to be mutually enjoyable to both people. Mutually enjoyable to both people. So guys, if you got a gal that wants to go to Home Depot on a date, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Keep that girl, all right? That's great. But most women don't call a trip to Home Depot a date. And now, my wife once took me to one of those little tea and like scones places. I don't even know what a scone is. Tea and scones, the little thing, and they have these. Why do they always have to have such little uncomfortable chairs in those things? And doilies everywhere. I mean, it was like doily world, right? And so I'm sitting in this little uncomfortable chair with this tea thing, and trying to balance my crumpet, and there I thought, this is not fun. And she looked at me. She goes, "You don't like this?" I go, "This is awful. We're never doing this again." And we never went back to the tea and scones place again, right? And that's good. And I don't ever take her to Home Depot on a date. We do something that we both really enjoy. So it's going to be mutually enjoyable to both people. And this is number three. It's probably the most important part of a date. Excuse me. The most important part is, and gentlemen, listen to this very carefully. It's got to be at least 3 hours in length. At least 3 hours. What? I got to take her out for 3 whole hours? What are we going to talk about? I got a lot of books back there. There's a book. There you go. Shameless plug. Thank you. Steve, you got that in. But that 8 Rules of Communication for Successful Marriages, we have more couples that write us and they go, that's our date night. We take that little book with us, and he will read a chapter out loud, or she'll read a chapter out loud. There's 8 dates for you right there. So what do we talk about? All right, but why is 3 hours important? Gentlemen, your woman is wired like this. For the first hour and a half, she's still mom. She's on the date with you, but she's thinking, did the babysitter drown the kids in the bath? Did I leave the curling iron plugged in? Did I unplug the iron? Did she burn down the house? Did she feed the kids yet? She's going through that whole Rolodex of things that could possibly go wrong in the universe of going wrong back at home. And after an hour and a half, she's finally done going through the Rolodex, and for the next hour and a half, she becomes your wife. And if she becomes your wife, good things happen. Good things happen. Follow me? All right, the guys are going, huh? What? All right, that's... Ladies, can you explain that to them later? You want her to transition from mom to your wife. All right? It's a tough crowd, all right? So find fun things to do together. That's number one. Number two is the letter R. Okay, refresh one another, and that means with the words that we use. I think Proverbs chapter 25 talks about refreshing words, encouraging words, uplifting words. It's so easy to get into that cranky, negative, critical space in life, especially when you're an old curmudgeon like me, right? And so the older you are, the more work you got to do to be that encouraging, uplifting person. You know, when was the last time? And I know, guys, I know you tell your wife she's beautiful, right? And that's fine. But when was the last time you really encouraged her about who she is and who she's become, and drew her out in terms of what does she want to do, in the next 10 years or 20 years of your life? We ought to be encouraging and exhorting and refreshing and reproving one another through the use of words. And again, if you become a bump on a log and you don't talk anymore to that woman, you got to stop that. Ephesians 4:15 says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up into all things, even Christ who is the head. Speaking is the first part of that. Gentlemen, she needs the verbal interaction with you. All right, that's number R. The next is the letter I. All right, include your spouse's ideas. Include your spouse's ideas in the plan. Both of you plan together. If you are a thinker or you're married to a thinker like I am, they've got all the dominoes all lined up. If Megan was right here when we normally give this talk, she would be kind of doing one of these right now because she comes up with a plan, and when I try to insert one of my dominoes in her plan, she's got the perfect plan. And then she can tweak her plan, but I'm not really welcome in tweaking her plan. So I've had to kind of work at that over the years and say, honey, no, we're not going to always do exactly what you want to do the way you want to do it. This is both of us. And so I've elbowed my way into that process, lovingly. But now both of us plan what we're going to do when we go out on a date. And so again, if you're that inclined to line up all those dominoes, make sure that you work hard to include the other person's ideas in the plan. It doesn't always have to be the same thing done the same way every time. What are we going to do? I don't know. Let's go to a movie. Let's go to dinner. Right? Where are we going to go? Let's go to the same place. I'll order the same thing. Right? You got to mix it up a little bit. If you're not sure, here comes the next shameless plug. I've got a book back there, 400 date ideas. It's a little booklet, and it's got 400 date ideas in it, all the way from $0 to lunch at the Eiffel Tower. That's expensive if you don't know. I once took Megan to lunch at the Eiffel Tower, and it's not that hard to do. You can actually get online and make a reservation, but you have to get from here all the way over there. And then you meet Jacques, the maitre d', he's the concierge. He's like one of those guys. And he takes you up the elevator, and he comes by with the little rake that they've got that they take the crumbs off your thing and off your table. And he says, "Monsieur," he says, "how are you enjoying your lunch?" And I said, "Oh, very good, Jacques. Thank you so much. And can I get you anything else? Maybe the dessert menu, And it's as cheesy as that. But we had the time of our life, and she talks about it still to this day. Now, it's not something we do every other week. It's something we did once. So we got free date ideas and we got expensive ones and everything in between. So include the others' ideas in the plan. Now, next is this, the letter E. Enjoy life through laughter. Enjoy life through laughter. Learn to laugh at yourselves, please. Learn to laugh at yourself. When I was a pastor, I loved pastoring, but the hardest times of pastoring came exclusively from people who grew up and became adults, and they hadn't ever learned to laugh at themselves. They took themselves way too seriously, and everything I said they took the wrong way. And they were just spring-loaded to be offended by virtually everything. And that you make everybody around you miserable if you're that person. You are funny. You do funny things. God looks at you sometimes and laughs. I believe God has a sense of humor. How do I know that? Look at me. He made this. He has a sense of humor. He really does. And if you look at yourself in the mirror, you're going to go, yeah. I'm not going to do the thing with the hair, but I get my kids kind of crazy sometimes because even after my kids are all grown and gone, I'll do it when the grandkids come over. I'll take my hair and I'll do like this. You're going, oh, did he really do that in public? And my wife goes like this. She goes, oh. And the grandkid's like, Dad, Grandpa, do it again. You're funny. It's funny. I used to have this thing on my head that was this beautiful, gorgeous thing of long hair, and oh my word, it was great. And God took care of that problem. Gone. But I couldn't do that before. Now I can do that now. You're funny. So learn to laugh at yourself. Find fun things to do together as a family that brings out laughter. One of the things that the Scheibners do around our house is pun wars. And somebody will start the pun, and the pun will keep on going. You're giving me a headache. Oh, that's very shellfish of you, right? Those kind of things. And it keeps going until finally the person that can't come up with another pun says to the other person, you're ugly. And that means that you won, and they just surrendered. And so it's so much fun. Years ago, a friend of ours gave us a book that was called 1,001 Jokes to Annoy Your Parents. And it lived up to its name. Oh, my word. And Nate, he was probably 8 years old. He would tell these jokes out of this book. And we would take the book and throw it out the window. And he'd go retrieve it, and bring it back in. Oh, it was so much fun. Mom and Dad, dance in the lobby of the restaurant when the music is playing. All right? This is a gift that keeps on giving. Because now you're at the point where you can actually embarrass your children in public. Oh, that's so wonderful. Such a choice gift. All those diapers you changed and all the times they spit up on you. Okay, this is payback for all of that. So you get in the lobby and you're waiting because they're putting your table together, and you've got 12 kids, so it takes quite a while to do that because you're like a daycare coming in. And so you're standing there in the lobby, and they start playing the Love Shack on the Muzak, and you're doing one of these, and your kids are like, no, make it stop, please. But meanwhile, they're all going like this, make it stop, right? And it warms their little heart because they go, Mommy loves Daddy, and Daddy loves Mommy. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. But when my adult kids realized that we were out with them, they were adult-ish at the time, and I think Love Shack came on, and Mrs. Scheibner and I were kind of mouthing the words to the song, and they looked at me, they looked at us, and they go, Mom and Dad know the words to Love Shack. Right? That's okay. It's okay. If you don't look it up, please, all right? Dance in the lobby. How many of you know what this is not politically correct. I'm sorry, I'm not wired that way. How many of you know what a Chinese fire drill is? Okay, all right. Do a Chinese fire drill with your kids. Now, there should be some modern name for this that makes it all more acceptable, but I don't know where it came from. But a Chinese fire drill is when you get to like a stop sign or a red light, and everybody gets out of the car and runs around and hops back in. So back in the day when we had the 8 children, we had the 15-passenger van, the big old van thing, gigantic. And so I said to the kids, I said, hey, we're going to do this fire drill thing when we get up to the light. And they're like, well, what is that? And I said, well, when we get to the light and we stop, everybody's going to jump out the side door. We're all going to run around the van, and we're going to jump back in. Now, my little millennials, here's how they responded. We can't do that. That's not safe. Yeah, we don't have helmets or anything. I'm looking in the rearview mirror, I go, who are you people? Come on, let's go. So we get to the red light, we stop, and I say, come on, grab the baby. And they get the car seat, and they're running around the car like this, They throw the baby in the back. So we look like a SWAT team coming out of that thing. The doors come flying out. Boom, boom, boom. Go, 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 go. Right? So what do they want to do? As soon as you do that, we get to the next red light. Let's do it again. The kids, now when we get together for family, the Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that stuff, what do you think they talk about? Talk about homeschooling? They talk about algebra lessons? No, they talk about the fire drills, and they talk about the fun stuff we did together. So learn to laugh together as a family. It'll really, really benefit you in the long run. All right, enjoy life through laughter. N is the next letter. Notice the small things a spouse does. Notice the small things a spouse does, and this is absolutely huge. But gentlemen, that woman has cooked 10,000 plus meals for you. She does your laundry and folds it up and puts it back in your drawer. When was the last time you said thank you for any of that? When was the last time you complained about something? Probably much more frequently than the times you said thank you, honey. I know you don't have to do this, but you've been so faithful with this over the years. And gentlemen, if you want to have a wife appreciation day, just trade places with her for one day. The grandkids were over, and everybody was out and doing stuff, and I had to watch the grandkids for 4.5 hours. Whew, I know. As a grandpa, you kind of run out of stuff to do, and so 2 words came to mind: duct tape. But no, don't do that. All right, that's a joke. It's a joke, right? But, I'm not wired like that. I don't have the patience that my wife did. She would come up with 4 things to do for 4 hours and have plenty of stuff left over afterwards, and I'm not wired that way. And so, guys, show appreciation. And ladies, the same thing, right? There's things that he's done over and over again for you. When was the last time you said thank you for that stuff? And you got to notice the small things that a spouse does. That really keeps the friendship vital when we notice the little things. And so back to my friend Pete. Did Pete have to say what he said at that lunch a couple weeks ago? No. But Pete had noticed something. And because of the friendship, he felt compelled to say something. And it was life-altering to me. It was so important to hear that from him. And so that's what friends do, right? They notice the small things that somebody else does. One of the things that Megan and I do to help with this process of remembering the small things is we keep a 3x5 card. I've got a couple of them in my Bible, and they're listed with just things I'm thankful for about her. And when I open up my Bible to have my quiet time, that 3x5 card always falls out. And I have to pick it up, and I have to look at it, and I have to put it back. But when I do that, it reminds me about the things that my wife does that I need to be more mindful of and mention. All right, the letter D is next. The ladies all love this one. The letter D, dole out the cash. Dole out the cash, you tightwads. You can't take it with you. Now, you guys, you put every dime you had together when you were advertising for that woman. And I remember, because I called my wife up, and I would say to her, I'd say, honey, how much, before she was my wife, how much money do you have? And she'd say, I got $3.30. All right, well, I got $6.60, so that's $9.90. Okay, where can we go for, just under $10? And we'd figure it out, and we'd go someplace, and we'd spend right up to the dime. And then we'd never leave a tip back in those days because we were poor and in college, and now we make up for it afterwards because nowadays I've got the money to leave a big tip, and I felt guilty from all those years of just running out and just paying the bill. But we found we would pull up the cushions on the couch and look for quarters and dimes and things that had fallen in just to get enough money to go out and have a good time with each other. And so dole out the cash. I'm all for the Dave Ramsey stuff and having all the categories and everything. Very, very important stuff. But you ought to have a category, a budgeted category for each other. You ought to invest in that primary relationship, whether you call it date night or you call it doorting or courting or whatever. Have some money set aside that you spend exclusively on one another, and then make sure you spend it, because you're going to be investing in the quality of the friendship with that person that you're going to go on the journey with for the rest of your life. So dole out the cash. The letter S is next. Sympathize with one another. Sympathize with one another. You don't need to pile on. If somebody's having a bad day, ladies, if your husband comes home and says, I had a bad day at the office, my boss called me in and he told me this, that, and the other thing, that's not the time for you to go, well, yeah, he's right. I see that at home as well. Okay, even if it's true, Megan's been my biggest cheerleader over the years. And she knows, she knows. Right? I told you that story about when Jim called me in and said, you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. Did I share that story? Okay. And she didn't pile on when I came home. She knew, she smiled, and she said, what do you want for dinner? She changed the subject. Right? That's because she loves me. And so sympathize with one another. Life is hard enough as it is. And as good friends, we bear one another's burdens, do we not? And so we rejoice together with one another, and we also bear one another's burdens. And the burden is easier to bear when somebody else is helping hold it up for you. And that's what a good spouse does. That's what my wife does. And I try to do that for her. I think she's better at it than I am. But sympathize with one another is hugely important. The letter H is next, all right? Help one another. Help one another. I need a lot of help. I get myself in way over my head way too often. And Megan is great. She's not only my suitable helper biblically, but she also sees those times where I'm just way in beyond my eyeballs, and she's like, all right, Steve, I'm going to help you out of this one, right? And she just comes in and does stuff. And even if I'm not deserving, or even if I did it to myself, even if she warned me ahead of time and I still got in over my head, she still comes up, and she might roll her eyes a little bit, but she comes in and helps. And I appreciate that. And I will do that with her as well. Now, helping doesn't mean help the other person out on a limb and then saw it off after them. I've seen a fair amount of that over the years with couples. Well, they fold their arms in the counseling session and they go, well, if he had asked me, I would have told him. But he knows everything. So, he's on his own. Yeah, I saw him getting into trouble. I saw where this was going. And you know what? He's so smart. He knows everything. I just let him get into trouble. And she's just got the saw. And she's just cutting that limb right off after him. And it goes the other way. Well, she knows everything, and she won't listen to me. And so help one another. Even if the other person isn't lovely or, wanting the help, jump in and help. You're a team. The next is the letter I. Isolate yourselves. Isolate yourselves. Get away and focus on your primary relationship. Do some goal setting when you're away on those weekends or weeks. Now, many of you, that's what you're doing this week. Now, when I say isolate yourself, that's not with the kids. If you take the kids, that's a family outing. That's great. Vacation is absolutely necessary. If you're here without the kids for the week, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Get away for a long weekend. Get away for a week. Isolate yourselves, just the two of you. How often do you do that? Probably once a year. At least. If you can afford to do it more than that, more often is better. But at least once a year, go away someplace. Don't take the kids with you. Talk about the goals of your relationship. What do you want next year to look like? Have some prayer time together. Nurture one another in terms of spirituality and those sort of things. Guys, this is so easy to do, but so easily overlooked as well. Just spend some time every day just praying with her. Just say, be the initiator in that, right? Initiator, protector, provider, lover. All four of those things fit into praying with your wife. Say, honey, there's just nothing on my mind in particular. You just want to spend 5 minutes praying? She'll say, oh, yeah, absolutely. Sit down and say, hey, honey, just pray about the kids, pray about the day, pray for her. How can I pray for you? If you do that on a daily basis, your friendship will blossom. Your friendship will absolutely blossom. So isolate yourself. Get away at least once a year and set some goals. And then finally, the letter P is this: publicly praise one another. Publicly praise one another. Matthew 3:17 is a place in the scriptures where we see Jesus being praised by God the Father and the Holy Spirit. So it's one of the only times we see all three together. But the Father says, when Jesus is getting publicly baptized, he said, this is my Son in whom I am what? Well pleased. And that was an audible voice that everybody could hear. And so, gentlemen, ladies, we need to have an audible voice when it comes to our spouse. There's never a place for venting about the other person to other people. We need to keep their testimony intact, but we need to publicly praise one another. One of the vows I made to Megan, my wife, before I stepped into the pulpit as a senior pastor was that I would never make a cheap shot wife joke at her expense, and I would never make a mother-in-law joke just to get a laugh. I've seen too many pastors do that. It gets a silly little awkward kind of giggle out of the congregation, but it's deriding important relationships. I love my mother-in-law. She's a wonderful gal. She's gone now from this earth, but you know what? I shouldn't deride her. She's not no opportunity to defend herself. It's not right. And I shouldn't throw my wife under the bus in front of a congregation just to get a joke out and just to get a laugh from people. And so I held on to that tenaciously. And then the opposite of that is I make sure that I talk about her lovingly and glowingly in public. And would you say I've been successful at that? What's your impression of Megan after 4 or 5 days? The fair and lovely Mrs. Scheibner. And she is. She's the fair and lovely. And she's a wonderful gal. And anybody that would have said yes to me and gone on this journey with me is a wonderful person, and she was the one that said yes to it. It's funny, years ago I used to teach my Navy leadership course, and I would call her the fair and lovely. And this one time we were talking on one of the breaks in the middle of the course, and she said, do you ever talk about me in these things? I said, oh yeah. I said, I call you the fair and lovely. And I think she was having a midlife crisis at the time. And so she said, I don't know that I like that. She said, you should refer to me as the hot and smoking. So I did from then on. And I thought, oh, that's just precious. All right. And I just shared that with you now. So, yeah, the fair and lovely Mrs. Scheibner, right? She's a great gal, and I hope you get to meet her someday. I would love to come back, and all of these things that I've done this week are just 10 times better with her here by my side, because she adds a perspective, ladies, that, again, reading one of her books is like having a cup of coffee with your best friend. You just keep turning the page. And she's got a rare gift. She's as good a public speaker as she is an author, and she's an excellent writer. So those two things don't always go together. Megan's got that gift. All right. So any thoughts or questions, or any, we're going to tie a ribbon on marriage right now. And then tonight we're going to come back, and I didn't give you much warning on what we're going to talk about tonight, but I'll give it to you right now. Tonight we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about Proverbs 31. Ooh, okay, now all the ladies just went, oh, really? Proverbs 31? And all the men just went, yeah, and they elbowed their wife. You need to pay attention to this, because this guy, I know he's going to give it to you tonight about Proverbs 31. You have probably heard Proverbs 31 taught wrong all these years. Now, I don't know what all you've heard about it, but Proverbs 31 is always introduced cynically, with an eye roll, usually sarcastically, with, well, ladies, we're going to talk about the ideal woman from Proverbs 31, as though any of us could be that ideal woman, but we're going to talk about her tonight. And here's the problem with that. Proverbs 31 was written to a man, not a woman. Does that change it for you? Come back this evening to find out the exciting conclusion of Proverbs 31. It's not what you think. It's absolutely not what you think. It's going to absolutely open up that proverb to you in a way that you've never seen it before. So I'm going to tease you with that. Any last questions or thoughts or anything you want to ask about marriage? Anybody got to know, by the way? All right, let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the privilege of being able to teach this week. And Lord, I love doing this. And it's fun, and we've gotten to be friends, many of us. We've had lots of side conversations and talked about life in general, and I just pray, Lord, that you would now help us to take some of the gems from your word that we've learned this week and put them into action. Help us to fulfill our roles specifically. Help us, Lord, to work on our friendship in the way that we just looked at it now, finding fun things to do together, enjoying life through laughter, publicly praising one another, isolating each other, going on a date night. Lord, none of these things are hard or impossible to do, not even cost prohibitive. They're actually reachable and attainable. So Lord, give us the encouragement, the nudge that we need to continue to do these things, that we would work on our friendships, we would become best friends, and we'd spend the rest of this journey with that person that has become the best friend in our life, and that person that we just love the most. And Lord, I thank you for that.